Have you ever poured every single drop of your soul into something? I mean everything. Your time, your savings, those precious late nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer stubborn willpower? Yeah, me too. For the last 3 years, that's been Pixel Bloom, my little indie game. It's, well, it's my baby. Growing it from just a flicker of an idea, scribbled code on napkins, into something real, something playable, something I dared to hope others might actually love. It's been the hardest, most exhilarating thing I've ever done. But then there are the moments. Moments where someone else's shadow falls over your tiny patch of sunshine, a shadow that feels chillingly deliberate. I remember standing there, in my own living room, the air thick with forced pleasantries and the smell of Kristin's overpowering perfume, looking at the spilled glass of red wine dangerously close, too close, to my development laptop. My entire world, thousands of hours of work, perched precariously on that table. And Kristin's voice, dripping with that sickly sweet blend of faux concern and something else? Oh, Mary, clumsy me. Goodness, I hope none got on your little computer thingy. Little computer thingy. Right. That sickening lurch in my stomach, the sudden cold dread. It wasn't just about the wine, it was the culmination. The sharp, painful point crystallizing years of subtle digs, patronizing advice, and the constant grinding suggestion that my passion was just a phase, a cute hobby I'd eventually get over. The question wasn't if she'd meant to do it. The question, hammering in my head, was how I was going to navigate this tangled mess without imploding, without letting her poison the one thing that made me feel truly alive. It's complicated. So complicated. It's a lot, I know. And I'm going to unpack it all. But first, please like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these stories. It helps a lot. Seriously, just a quick click makes a huge difference. Okay? Thanks. So, rewind a bit. Christopher, my husband, bless his supportive heart, and we live here in this organized chaos. He's amazing, truly. Works in tech marketing, understands the long hours, the creative obsessions. Mostly. His family, though, that's another dimension. Especially his sister, Kristin, and her husband, Stephen. They operate on a different frequency. Think sharp. Suits, sharper opinions, and a definition of success measured strictly in corner offices and stock options. Stephen's deep in finance, climbs that ladder like it's Mount Everest, and honestly, good for him. But their visits always felt less like catching up and more like evaluations. Performance reviews I never asked for, Kristin, particularly. She has this way of framing condescension as care. Mary, honey, are you sure spending all this time on a game is sustainable? Stephen was saying the market is so saturated. Or, wouldn't you be less stressed with a regular 9 to 5? Think of the stability. Stability. That word always hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. Like my dream, my actual career, that I was building line by painstaking line of code, was inherently unstable, frivolous. Christopher tried sometimes. He'd gently steer the conversation away, praise my progress, show them early builds of Pixel Bloom. They'd offer tight smiles. Stephen might ask some pointed question about monetization strategy that felt designed to trip me up, while Kristin would admire the cute little characters, before immediately changing the subject to their upcoming trip to Tuscany, or Stephen's latest bonus. It wasn't overt hostility, not usually. It was worse. It was dismissal. A constant, low-hum erosion of my confidence, chipping away at the foundations I was so desperately trying to build. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering held at their impeccably minimalist, sterile house, a place utterly devoid of the comfortable clutter of creativity, felt like walking into an ambush dressed up as a social call. Stephen holding court about market trends, Kristin subtly comparing my project to her own very real job managing a PR team. It was exhausting. I'd come home feeling drained, questioning my choices, my talent, my sanity. Was I delusional? Was this whole game developer dream just a self-indulgent fantasy? Their perfectly curated world, all polished surfaces and predictable trajectories, started to feel like the real world, and mine filled with pixel sprites and narrative arcs, felt increasingly fragile. The wine incident wasn't the beginning. Oh no. It was just the moment the carefully constructed facade cracked wide open, revealing something much uglier underneath. It was the moment I realized the undermining wasn't just casual condescension. It felt calculated. And that terrified me. That near miss with the wine. It wasn't an isolated storm cloud in an otherwise clear sky. Looking back, it was more like the lightning strike that finally illuminates a landscape already riddled with fault lines, tremors I'd been dismissing for far too long. Little earthquakes disguised as casual remarks, aftershocks masked as helpful suggestions. It's insidious, isn't it? How doubt can be planted like a seed, watered with seemingly innocent words until it grows into this choking vine around your own self-worth. Kristin became the master gardener of my insecurities. She'd peer over my shoulder while I was working, usually uninvited, gliding into my office space after letting herself in with the key Christopher insisted she have for emergencies. She'd squint at the screen, head tilted. Oh, is that the main character? Interesting choice. A little niche, maybe? Have you thought about something more universally appealing? Universally appealing. Code for bland, marketable, something Stephen would approve of. Or she'd forward me articles. Thought of you, Mary. About failed indie game studios or the psychological toll of unstable freelance careers. Helpful, right? Except the subtext screamed, "Give up. This is pointless. You're wasting your time." Stephen's approach was less delicate. His jabs were usually delivered during those excruciating family dinners, often directed more at Christopher, but clearly intended for me. Heard about Sarah's promotion, he'd boom across the table, referring to some acquaintance with a predictably corporate job. Big money, real security, you know? Must be nice, Chris, knowing your household has that kind of foundation. The implication hung there, thick and oily, that my contribution, my all-consuming passion project, wasn't just less valuable, it was practically negligible. A financial drag. Christopher would shift uncomfortably, maybe try to defend my progress, talk about milestones achieved, positive feedback from beta testers. But Stephen would just wave a dismissive hand. Sure, but passion doesn't pay the mortgage, eh? Kristin would nod sympathetically, placing a perfectly manicured hand on Christopher's arm. We just worry, Chris. We want you both to be secure. See? Always framed as concern, always twisting the knife with a gentle smile. It was maddening, utterly maddening, and the guilt trips. Oh, the guilt trips were exquisite works of art. There was the time I had to miss Kristin's impromptu garden party, thrown naturally on the one weekend I had a critical, game-breaking bug to fix before a showcase deadline. Missing it wasn't ideal. I wanted to go, but Pixel Bloom was at a precipice. Failure wasn't an option. The voicemail Kristin left dripped with wounded disappointment. Oh, Mary, we missed you so much. Everyone was asking where you were. Stephen even made his special sangria. Such a shame you couldn't prioritize family just this once. Prioritize family. As if my work, the thing consuming my every waking thought, wasn't also about building a future for our family, mine and Christopher's. As if their mandatory fun was somehow more sacred than my actual career deadline. Christopher tried to run interference, explaining the pressure I was under, but the narrative was set. Mary, the unreliable, slightly selfish one, lost in her little fantasy world. It was around this time that Scott, Christopher's quieter, more observant younger brother, inadvertently threw me a lifeline. We were at some obligatory family barbecue, Kristin holding court about her latest home renovation project, Stephen pontificating about the stock market. I'd retreated to the edge of the patio, nursing a drink, just trying to breathe. Scott came over, handed me another beer. He just sort of stood there for a minute, watching Kristin. Then he said, "Quiet. Enough so only I could hear, 'Don't let her get to you, Mary.' She was the same with Christopher's college girlfriend, the artist one. Drove her nuts, always just trying to help." It was a small comment, almost throwaway. But it landed like an anchor in my swirling sea of self-doubt, validation. It wasn't just me. It wasn't my imagination playing tricks. This was a pattern, a well-worn groove of behavior. Kristin and Stephen didn't just disapprove of my path. They seemed to actively interfere with any path Christopher took that didn't align perfectly with their narrow worldview. The artist girlfriend, his brief flirtation with teaching history before Stephen convinced him it was financial suicide. It clicked. Suddenly, the helpful suggestions and concerned inquiries felt less like misguided attempts at guidance and more like strategic maneuvers in a long game of control. The spilled wine incident, viewed through this new lens, shifted from potential carelessness to probable malice. An escalation, a warning shot. What else had I missed? What other accidents had nearly happened? My mind raced, replaying small, unsettling moments. The time my external hard drive mysteriously unplugged itself during their visit. The helpful tidying up that resulted in crucial design notes vanishing. Were these just coincidences? Or was I standing on the edge of something far more sinister than just condescension? The air felt colder, the shadows in their perfect house seemed longer, and the need to protect Pixel Bloom, and myself, became fiercely, urgently clear. Scott's words were like a key turning in a rusty lock. Suddenly, the pattern wasn't just visible. It was glaring, undeniable. That barbecue marked a shift, not a loud dramatic change, but a quiet, internal recalibration. My perception sharpened. I started noticing everything. The way Kristin's eyes lingered a little too long on my screen when she thought I wasn't looking. The subtle shifts in conversation Stephen engineered to steer things back towards my perceived instability. It was like my ears were suddenly tuned to a frequency I couldn't hear before. The low hum of their persistent disapproval. The static crackle of their veiled attempts to undermine me. I didn't become paranoid exactly, not overnight. But I did become cautious, vigilant. I started backing up my work obsessively, using cloud storage and multiple external drives, keeping one off-site. I password protected everything, even files. That seemed innocuous. It felt slightly absurd, like I was fortifying my little digital world against an unseen enemy, but the unease spurred me on. That nagging feeling, the ghost of spilled wine and unplugged hard drives, wouldn't leave me alone. The real turning point, the moment suspicion hardened into cold certainty, arrived disguised as a Tuesday afternoon. Pixel Bloom had just launched its early access demo on a popular indie platform. It was terrifying, exhilarating, like sending your kid to school for the first time. I was glued to the initial feedback, heart pounding with every new comment notification. Most were encouraging, constructive, some even genuinely enthusiastic. Then, they started appearing, a trickle at first, then a steady stream. Comments that weren't just critical, they were vicious, personal. They attacked the art style, childish scribbles, the narrative, pretentious drivel, the core mechanics, buggy mess, developer is clueless. The language was oddly specific, echoing some of Kristin's earlier suggestions, twisted into venomous critiques. One anonymous user, Real World Dev 6, was particularly relentless, posting walls of text, dissecting perceived flaws with surgical cruelty. It felt disproportionate. Overkill for a small indie demo. My blood ran cold. This wasn't typical internet negativity. This felt targeted, coordinated. My hands were shaking as I started digging. Call it intuition, call it desperation. I clicked on Real World Dev 6's profile. Minimal information, generic avatar. But they'd commented on other games too. Always negatively, always with a distinctively condescending tone about artistic ambition versus market realities. It sounded familiar. Too familiar. Then I saw it. A tiny detail I almost missed. In one of their older forum posts complaining about server lag on some mainstream game, they'd mentioned their specific high-end internet service provider, the exact same premium one Stephen constantly bragged about having, the one he claimed was essential for serious professionals. Coincidence? Maybe. Maybe. But the knot in my stomach tightened into a fist. I started cross-referencing. I looked back at old emails, searching for Steven's digital footprint. He used various usernames for different things, but he had a pattern. Often variations involving finance terms or his initials. And then, buried in the sign-off of an old group email organizing a family event, was a secondary email address I'd barely registered at the time, an address linked to a gaming profile on another platform. And that profile's username? Serious Market 6. Close. Eerily close to real-world Dev 6. Too close. It still wasn't definitive proof, not courtroom-level evidence. But I knew, the way you know when the air changes before a storm. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The constant dismissal, the helpful critiques designed to sow doubt, the accidents, and now this. Anonymous digital sabotage aimed directly at the heart of my creation, timed perfectly to inflict maximum damage during its most vulnerable moment. It wasn't just disapproval anymore, this was active hostility. An attempt to cripple my project, perhaps even drive me to abandon it entirely. I felt a wave of icy fury wash over me, followed immediately by a profound sense of violation. They hadn't just attacked my game. They'd invaded my space, my passion, trying to tear down something I'd built with my own hands and heart, all under the guise of family concern. That evening, Kristin called. Her voice was saccharine sweet. "Mary, saw your little game thing popped up online. How brave of you. Any feedback yet? Anything? Constructive?" The urge to scream, to confront her right then and there, to lay out the ugly truth I'd pieced together, was overwhelming. It clawed at my throat. But some instinct, some deep-seated need for self-preservation, held me back. No, not like this. A messy, emotional outburst would only feed their narrative of me being unstable, irrational. If I was going to confront this, I needed more. I needed irrefutable proof. I needed a strategy. The fight wasn't just about Pixel Bloom anymore. It was about reclaiming my space, my voice, my right to define my own success without their poison, seeping into the foundations. The battle lines had been drawn, not by me, but for me. And I realized, with a chilling certainty, that I had to fight back. Carefully. Methodically. The decision to fight back wasn't made in anger, not really. It settled over me with a cold, quiet resolution. This wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. The survival of my project, yes, but more importantly, the survival of my own spirit against their relentless, insidious campaign. So, I became a detective in my own life. It felt surreal, meticulously documenting slights and searching for digital breadcrumbs left by people who were supposed to be family. The anonymous online attacks were my starting point. Real-world Dev 6 and Serious Market 6. The connection felt undeniable in my gut, but gut feelings don't dismantle carefully constructed facades. I needed something more solid. I spent hours I should have been polishing Pixel Bloom's next update, trawling through old forum posts, social media comments, anywhere Steven might have left a digital footprint. It was painstaking, soul-crushing even. But then, bingo. On a completely unrelated tech forum discussing high-end graphics cards, Serious Market 6 posted a picture of his gaming setup to prove a point. And there, just visible in the corner of the photo, on the desk beside the gleaming tower PC, a distinctive custom-made mug. A mug I instantly recognized because I had given it to Steven for Christmas 2 years prior, featuring a caricature of him wrestling a bear market graph. My heart hammered. It was circumstantial, yes, but it was strong. It placed that username, the one so chillingly similar to the relentless troll attacking my game, squarely in Steven's physical space. Then I turned to Kristin. Her sabotage was less digital, more atmospheric. The constant stream of helpful negativity, the subtle guilt trips. How do you document a feeling, an undermining tone? I started saving her voicemails, the ones dripping with faux concern. I screenshotted the backhanded compliments sent via text. Reading them sequentially, stripped of the immediate context of a conversation, the pattern was undeniable. It was a masterclass in passive aggression, a slow, steady drip of poison designed to erode confidence. I even found the notes Kristin had helpfully left scattered on my desk after one of her tidying up sprees during a visit, pages torn, from a notebook filled with unsolicited, often contradictory ideas for Pixel Bloom, many of which directly mirrored the criticisms later posted by Real World Dev 6. It felt like she was feeding him lines, or at the very least, reinforcing his attacks with her seemingly innocent observations. The final piece, the one that solidified everything, came from Scott. I called him, feeling awkward, unsure how to even broach the subject. "Scott," I started, stumbling over the words. "Remember what you said at the barbecue? About Kristin and Christopher's old girlfriend?" He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Yeah, the artist. Kristin called her flaky, said she wasn't serious enough for Chris. Stephen told Chris her paintings would never sell, that he needed someone with real prospects." Scott sighed. "Look, Mary, I love my brother, and Kristin, she's Kristin. But they've always done this. Tried to manage Christopher's life. His friends, his jobs, who he dated. They dress it up as looking out for him, but it's always been about control, about keeping him in their orbit, living the life they think he should live. Stephen especially. He sees anything outside his definition of success as a threat, I think. And Kristin just enables him, amplifies it." Hearing it laid out so plainly, confirming my own observations and the digital evidence I'd unearthed, it was horrifyingly validating. The puzzle pieces clicked into place, forming a grim picture of manipulation and control, stretching back years, armed with screenshots, saved voicemails, Scott's testimony echoing in my ears, and the picture of that damn mug burned into my brain. I knew I had to talk to Christopher. I dreaded it. How do you tell the person you love that his own sister and brother-in-law are actively trying to sabotage your career, your dream? I waited until a quiet evening, the comforting glow of my monitors contrasting sharply with the ugly conversation I was about to initiate. I took a deep breath and just laid it all out. The comments, the usernames, the mug, Kristin's voicemails, Scott's confirmation of their history. I watched his face shift from confusion to disbelief, then flicker with a defensive loyalty that quickly crumbled into dawning horror as the weight of the evidence settled. He went pale. He kept shaking his head, scrolling through the screenshots on my tablet, his expression growing tighter, angrier. "That mug," he whispered. "He loves that stupid mug." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fury and hurt. "All this time, I thought they were just awkward. Maybe a little snobby about the game stuff, but this is..." He couldn't finish the sentence. Seeing his own family's behavior through my eyes, stripped bare of excuses and rationalizations, clearly devastated him. But crucially, he believed me. He saw the pattern. He saw the malice. There were tears, mine and his. There was anger. But there was also a fierce, protective resolve hardening in his eyes. We sat there for a long time, the silence heavy but strangely unifying. The question wasn't if we needed to do something, it was what. We talked through options. A dramatic blow-up, cutting them off completely, slowly distancing ourselves. We decided against immediate raw confrontation. Like me, Christopher realized that wouldn't solve anything. It would just give them ammunition. Instead, we decided on a different approach. A calm, clear, boundary-setting conversation. We would present the core evidence, not to accuse or demand apologies we'd likely never get, but to state, unequivocally, that we knew, and that things had to change, drastically. We would host it here, in our space, on our terms. The dread was still there, but now it was mixed with a sense of shared purpose. We were a team, and we were ready. The day we'd chosen for the conversation felt unnaturally heavy, the air in our apartment thick with anticipation. We didn't tidy up excessively or try to pretend we were anything other than who we were, a couple living, and working in a space filled with the comfortable chaos of creative pursuits. When Kristin and Stephen arrived, their usual air of effortless superiority seemed brittle, forced. We skipped the usual awkward pleasantries, Christopher guiding, them to the living room, his expression calm but unyielding. We sat. The silence stretched for a beat too long before Christopher spoke, his voice steady. He didn't raise it, didn't accuse. He simply stated that we needed to address a pattern of behavior that had become deeply damaging. He started with the history, referencing Scott's confirmation of their interference in his past, framing it not as an attack, but as necessary context. Then, calmly, methodically, I took over. I presented the evidence of the online attacks, the usernames, the specific, cruel phrasing mirroring Kristin's comments, the picture of Steven's mug linked to the Serious Market Heart6 account. I showed them the saved voicemails, the texts. I spoke about the accidents, the constant undermining disguised as concern. Kristin's reaction was instantaneous, explosive, predictable almost. This is insane. You're paranoid, Mary. Twisting things. We were only trying to help you. And Steven would never... Her voice cracked with manufactured outrage, her eyes darting towards her husband for support. Steven, however, looked cornered. He avoided my gaze, his face flushed. He started to bluster, something about internet trolls being everywhere, about misinterpretations, but the usual conviction wasn't there. He looked deeply uncomfortable, maybe even ashamed, especially when Christopher quietly pointed out the near-impossible coincidence of the troll knowing specific details discussed only within our home. The key wasn't their denial, though. It was Christopher. He didn't waver. He stood his ground, shoulder to shoulder with me. "This isn't up for debate," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "We know what's been happening. The constant criticism, the sabotage, it stops. Now, we need space. Real space. Our lives, Mary's career, our choices, they are not open for your commentary or interference any longer. Until you can respect that, genuinely respect us, things have to be different." The air crackled. Kristin looked utterly flabbergasted, unused to being challenged, especially by Christopher. Steven just stared at his hands. They didn't apologize. They didn't admit fault, not really. Kristin muttered something about us being ungrateful and deluded. But the fight had gone out of them. They left soon after, the departure stiff and cold, leaving behind a strange mix of exhaustion, relief, and a profound sadness in the apartment. Months slid by. Almost a year now, actually. The silence from Kristin and Steven was deafening at first, then gradually settled into a new, distant normal. We see them occasionally at obligatory larger family functions, but the dynamic is irrevocably changed. The visits stopped, the unsolicited advice ceased. The boundaries, it seemed, were holding, maintained perhaps less out of respect and more out of a grudging necessity to maintain some connection with Christopher. Pixel Bloom. It didn't become an overnight global sensation, but it found its audience. The early access phase, despite the initial sabotage attempt, smoothed out. We got solid reviews, built a small but fiercely loyal community. It even got nominated for a Best Narrative award at a small indie festival. Didn't win, but the nomination itself felt like a victory plucked from the jaws of potential defeat. It's sustaining itself now. More than that, it's growing. Slowly, organically. My work feels lighter now. Still challenging, still requiring those late nights, but free from that constant, corrosive drip of external doubt. Steven actually approached me a few months ago, at some extended family thing. It was awkward. He mumbled something that vaguely resembled an apology, focused narrowly on the unpleasantness online, careful not to admit direct involvement, but acknowledging it was out of line. It wasn't much. It wasn't accountability. But it was something. A crack in the denial, maybe. Kristin remains cordial, but distant. Polite on the surface, but the underlying resentment is palpable. Full reconciliation seems unlikely. Maybe impossible. And strangely, I'm okay with that. Sometimes late at night, when I'm finally debugging that last tricky line of code or sketching out a new level design, the aroma of coffee brewing quietly beside me, I think about this whole mess. My victory wasn't about beating them. It wasn't about forcing an apology or changing who they are. It was about reclaiming my own definition of success. It's here, in the quiet satisfaction of creation, in the resilience it took to protect my peace, in the strength Christopher and I found together. Success isn't just measured in financial stability or conventional achievements, despite what Stephen and Kristin believe. It's in the courage to pursue your passion, even when the world, or just your immediate family, tells you it's foolish. It's in building a life, however unconventional, that feels authentic and fulfilling to you. It's in the quiet confidence of knowing your worth isn't determined by someone else's narrow standards. It's finding peace, not in the absence of conflict, but in the ability to navigate it without losing yourself. So that's my story. It's messy, complicated, and definitely didn't go the way I expected. But I learned a lot. Mostly about boundaries, resilience, and what truly matters. What would you have done in my situation? How would you handle family undermining your dreams? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'd genuinely love to hear them, and if you want to hear more stories like this, maybe figuring things out together, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out. Thanks for listening.